Hey, I'm 20 years old now. What's up? It's the Culture Detective here, getting my ass exposed because multiple people I know found out my YouTube channel. A couple days ago I have turned 20 years old. And my birthday is September 7th, so I celebrated yesterday. I had a great dinner. I didn't cook. I ordered food on Grubhub and I bought myself a small slice of cake to enjoy. And another thing I did to celebrate my birthday is to watch a movie that's good, to watch a good movie. And usually I would watch movies that I haven't seen before. Last year, back in 2021, I watched Ikiru by Kurosawa as my birthday film, and I freaking love it. It's a fantastic film. And this time I decided to watch Miyazaki Hayao's Mononoke Hime, or Princess Mononoke. Princess Mononoke is a Studio Ghibli film. It is an anime film by Studio Ghibli, and it is written and directed by the one and only master of anime himself, Miyazaki Hayao. And I have already seen a few Studio Ghibli films. Ever since I was a kid, I've already watched Spirited Away. I loved it. I rewatched it and reviewed it last year, and it is fantastic. I also recently, earlier, I believe this year, or I think at the end of last year, I think this year, I watched My Neighbor Totoro, which is also a really good movie. It's really different from Spirited Away. It's one of the oldest movies out of the studios, and it's a very plotless, kind of a happy-go-lucky kind of a kids movie. Not everyone's gonna enjoy it, but I really like it. I don't think it's perfect, but I really like it. So now let's talk about the one and only Studio Ghibli fan pick. The Studio Ghibli fans pick, and that is Princess Mononoke. So usually people who are not super familiar with anime, they would probably think Spirited Away is the best Studio Ghibli film, but the true Studio Ghibli fans pick, the true anime fan pick, is always Mononoke Hime. So, yeah, wow, wow, this movie is amazing. This movie is absolutely amazing. So, to put it simply, Princess Mononoke is about a prince. A prince, his town got attacked by a boar demon. He tried to kill the demon. The demon touched his arm, and now his arm has a scar, and it's a curse, and it'll spread and it'll kill him. So he travels far away to the west to look for a cure. And that's pretty much the premise of the movie. But of course, the more you watch this movie, the more you would realize that the premise, the real plot of the movie, is totally not about that at all. And I'm not going to spoil it. You should go watch it. Don't don't look into spoilers. In fact, don't even look at the synopsis of the movie. Don't learn about anything about this movie. Just go into this movie blindly and it will really surprise you. The direction that this movie goes towards is very unexpected. But yeah, anyways, this is like the opposite of My Neighbor Totoro. My Neighbor Totoro is very plotless, but this one is basically the opposite. It is very dense, it is grand, and it is profound. And it tackles themes that a child will not really understand. Themes like mankind versus nature. Even themes like war and politics are tackled in this film. Kids will not get it. And so, this movie is more violent than any other Studio Ghibli films I've seen. We got severed limbs, we got decapitated heads, we got a lot of really disgusting, bloody, gory scenes whenever an animal is uh, hurt or killed. We have some blood spurts. So obviously, the target audience of this movie are not really kids, maybe teens, but not kids. This movie is not made for kids. And I think that's one of the reasons why I actually ended up enjoying this even more. This is unexpectedly mature. I wouldn't say adult, but this is a bit more mature than the usual Studio Ghibli film. But even though this movie feels more mature, it still has a childlike wonder. The world that this movie has is still very interesting and intricate and fantastical. It's still amazing. Every single scene features something new and interesting. And again, when I say this movie is more mature, I don't just mean that there is more violence and there's more gore and thematically more mature. It genuinely feels more mature in terms of directing. The movie uses a lot of editing tricks and a lot of wide shots, a lot of longer takes, longer shots, as in longer duration. And again, not for kids, because kids would be bored by those shots because a kid's attention span is kind of short. But with these longer takes and these wider shots, this movie feels a lot more teenage and sometimes even more adult oriented in terms of the directing, which is really great. Of course, the animation is freaking fantastic. It is absolutely amazing. The colors are so vibrant and beautiful, and the design is amazing. I think composition wise, it's great as well. Some of the movements, because there are a lot of wide shots, there are actually a lot of shots in this anime film where you see masses of people, huge groups of people running from point A to point B. And the animation of every single little person is just so intricate and detailed. It's just amazing. I was just completely in awe throughout the entire duration of the movie. And again, the animal movements, the nature, the design of everything is just absolutely gorgeous. The score, I know I say this for every Studio Ghibli film, but the score by Hisashi Jo is fantastic. But again, this movie is more mature because in Spirited Away, almost every single scene is laced with music. But in this movie, there's actually a surprising amount of silence. There are a lot of shots in this movie where it's very quiet. We don't hear anything but diegetic noise. And it's a lot more, I guess, impactful. A lot of climactic scenes actually feature no music in this movie, and they hit so much harder. And speaking of sound, let's talk about the sound design. Oh my god, the sound design of this movie is amazing. This is peak sonic experience in an anime for me. I think every single sound design is great. The sound mixing is great. Again, lots of wide shots. And with wide shots, you have distance. You have things happening in the foreground, and you have things happening in the background. And so the background noises are more quiet, the foreground is more noisy, and they mix it perfectly. And again, the water sounds are crisp. The trees, why are there so many mosquitoes? The kodama of the forest, their head spinning and it sort of clicks. The boars and the monkeys and the wolves, the animal noises are so believable. And just the scenes where we're in the middle of a town, we're in the middle of a city, and you have so many layers of noise, like people chatter, smoke, footsteps, wind noise. Like it's just so well done. It's amazing. And lately I've been paying a lot more attention to sound whenever I watch movies because my last short film has such terrible sound. I'm now even more curious on how sound works in film. So I'm just very impressed with the sound design of this film. And also, having watched a lot of Kurosawa films, there are actually a lot of Kurosawa moments in this movie. Miyazaki is probably pretty heavily inspired by Kurosawa in this film. There are a lot of scenes in this movie that remind me of Throne of Blood, reminds me of The Hidden Fortress, reminds me of Seven Samurai. A lot of the shots feel similar, but made anime, made livelier. You know, when the samurais are fighting in the streets, and then all the other civilians, they hide inside the houses, but they peek out of the windows with a very scared look on the face. Literally Yojimbo, but in a Studio Ghibli film, and that's freaking awesome. Yeah, let's talk about the story itself. It's amazing. Honestly, the story is the best part of this whole movie. The obvious theme here is mankind versus nature. And a lot of people make a connection between this movie and Avatar, and obviously this movie is 100, 1,000 times better than Avatar. But in Avatar, mankind is the villain, nature is the good guys. But in here, they're both good. There's no necessary evil. It's just a conflict between two parties because they can't really coexist. And I love this so much more. This conflict is so much more nuanced, it's so much more profound and thought provoking. And it actually has a lot more to say than movies like Avatar. Again, when the main character, the prince, sort of wander through the forest and run into a group of people, go through a city and then go into the woods, into the jungle. He learns so much about the world, and he basically sees both sides of the problem, and it's just very fascinating and thought-provoking. But not only is this an amazing showcase of mankind versus nature, but it's also a fantastic showcase of Japanese folklore. Alongside Mushishi and Kwaidan, this might be the best cinematic showcase of Japanese folklore I've seen on the screen. I really love movies that do this. I really love movies that really dabble in its own folklore, in its own culture, and the forest, the monkeys and wolf gods, the deer god, the boar gods, the demons, and how they interact with the samurais and the small cities and the small businesses. It's so immersive, but it's also very fascinating. And this movie is also surprisingly feminist, and I really like that. A lot of the female characters in this movie actually show a lot of cleavage, and one may think, wow, okay, this movie is trying to be sexual. Obviously, it's not for kids. And yeah, I do think this movie is not for kids, but I don't think it's a sexual thing. I very much think it's a thing where the movie tries to show that, hey, women can be bosses too. Women can be badasses too. And it's a very common thing in movies nowadays, but this movie came out in 1997, so that's something. And yeah, we have tons of scenes where women just tell men to, you know, screw off, just go off, and do their own thing. How they handle the ironworks, and it's just a it's just a really nice aspect. And overall, the story is, it feels cynical because the whole mankind versus nature thing. It just makes the whole situation a lot more depressing. Like, okay, they cannot coexist at all. But at the very end of the movie, in the last act, Miyazaki Hayao manages to sneak in an emotional beat and wrap up the entire story in a very nice way. So a lot of people may think the ending is a bit tacked on, but it makes it so much more emotional for me. Like, I watched it and it's just like, wow, wow. So yeah, these are my thoughts on Princess Mononoke. I think this is one of the best anime films I've ever watched, if not the best. You know, a couple weeks ago I watched Paprika by Kon Satoshi, and I said that's probably the best anime film I've ever watched. Well, that's no longer true. I'm giving Mononoke Hime by Miyazaki Hayao a 10 out of 10. So, have you watched this movie from 1 to 10? Would you rate it, like it, and subscribe if you want more. And thanks for watching.